Okay, welcome to Real Estate First Friday Live. Okay, I am your host, Stephen L. Skakandy with Living in and Around Jacksonville, part of the Skakandy group at LPT Realty. And this Friday, I wanted to go live around 3 p.m. We're a little bit late today because this is the first time we're doing this. I'm actually unscripted today. This is not a recorded video, this is actually live video. I wanted to do this time to time just to bring you some thoughts that I'm having about the real estate market in general, as well as past stories and anecdotes. And eventually, you all be able to chime in and comment. So make sure you follow the Living in and Around Jacksonville, North Carolina site, where every Friday we post videos just like this one, usually recorded, that answer your pressing questions about real estate concerns and whether your needs need to be met in 9 months, 9 weeks, or 9 days. We have a plan to help you win in this or any market. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to talk from the 35,000 foot level real quick about what the market's doing in general. Okay. And just some things that we're seeing. And I'm looking forward to hearing your comments in the comment bar or however this works. Like I said, I'm working on it. So the market always sends us signals and tells us things. Sometimes we choose to listen to it, and sometimes we don't for whatever reason. That's just kind of is what it is, right? But let's talk about what it's telling us right now. If we look back at the data from July 2026, only last month, because of course, August is not done yet. We're still processing stuff for August. And those numbers won't be available to us from September until September. So let's go back to July. Okay. So if you look at the July pending home sales, okay, and I use the information from NAR, okay, we found that basically there was a 2.3% month over month drop. Okay. And that means it's been the second lowest reading on record. Okay. If we compare it to, say, July 2021, we're down 36%. Okay. And that's still 33% below pre-pandemic levels. Okay. And that's 2018, 2019 levels. Really, as soon as we hit 2020, by the end of February, people were starting to get sick, and that changed things, right? And that we never saw a market like that before. So some of it is how do you want to cut the numbers, right? Okay. And then all four major US regions have had monthly declines. Okay. And that's the North, the South, the East, and the West. Okay. So if we break it down by lowest region, we're down 4.7% month over month. And that's a new all-time low. That's out west. Okay. That's 47.4% below July 2021 numbers. Now, again, that's July 2021. Those were still wild times, right? Because we were still knee deep in pandemic challenges during that time. Okay. In the South, okay, we're the largest home selling region in the South in the general. Okay. We're down 2.2% month over month. And that's the lowest it's been since January of 2025. In the Northeast, we're down 2% month over month. And that's very much below 5 year ago levels for the North. And then the Midwest, it's the only region, believe it or not, that's placed a year over year gain, but they're still below. So why is that? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with external factors that are, of course, beyond our control. And because of technology and social media and everything else like that, stability is very hard to come by, right? We have extremes one way or extremes the other. And like I said, certainly from April 2020 to about April of 2022, I mean, those were absolutely insane times. And the good times, the easy times for sellers, because are we talking about buyers? Are we talking about sellers? And it's important to clarify that. The good times for sellers was really up until the end of 2023, and then things started to change. It's still rough for buyers right now, right? It can be because of we have both high interest rates and high prices right now. And it's the only time in US history where we've had highs of both. And that's very, very unique. Of course, external factors such as, the war has put a lot of stress on people, the Straits of Hormuz, energy prices. When you look at inflation, the price of energy is high, and that's kind of affecting everything else. So there's a couple different factors going on. If I was, purchasing, myself right now, I would simply say I still think all this unrest aside, I think it's a good time to buy in comparison to the last few years for this reason, because you actually have the ability to speak and communicate, with a seller, and they're only going to come so far off their price because we haven't seen prices come down. And I'll come back to that in a minute, why we haven't seen that. But I would argue it's a good time for you because you can have a conversation. And try to remember this: real estate is the only business out there where it doesn't have to be a zero sum game. Normally, in most businesses, in most aspects of life, you have winners and you have losers. Okay. Two different sides of the coin. But real estate is truly a fascinating asset class because I would argue that both people can win at the same time. Okay. Everybody can win in a transaction because at the end of the day, you have somebody that wants to sell, you have somebody else that wants to buy. And I think you have to understand that you're never going to get everything you want, but if you get the main things of what you want, that's a very good negotiation. That's something where everybody can win. It's certainly possible for that. That's important to understand. So, because of that, I would argue now we have a situation where buyers and sellers can talk and discuss things. So, sorry, it's not a buyer's market. Okay. Why is it not? Because it's not a buyer's market because there's limited inventory. Okay. If seller can't get what they want, they pull their home off the market. It's just that simple. And then that's gone. And you're still competing with other buyers over a finite source of inventory. But I think it's also important that sellers understand that they have to discuss and have a meeting of the minds, and they have to have some semblance of cooperation with a buyer. Again, it doesn't have to be a zero sum game. Everybody can win here. So put aside what Uncle Freddie did 2 years ago, okay, or what somebody you read about on socialist media said they did, 2 years ago. And let's focus on our situation and making good decisions for us right now. Okay. So that's what I think it's very important to understand when you're talking about the market as a whole. So one way you could look at those numbers and say everybody's down and talk about the sky falling, or you can look at it and say, hey, look, here's my situation. Life is still going on. I might have just gotten married, or maybe just gotten divorced. Maybe I just had a son or a daughter, or maybe I just buried a parent. Maybe I got a new job. Maybe I got fired from my old job. Life still happens, and we move. And what your interest rate is really irrelevant at the end of the day. It's about finding that home that fits your need, and your financing can be changed later. It's just that simple. Okay. So let's not make it more than that. It's just that simple. Well, great. So that's the market, big ticket level. But before we go today, I'd like to end with a story, which I feel is a positive story. And it also supports what we just talked about because it shows buyers and sellers working together. And in this story, this is a situation where the buyers and sellers had to work together again after the transaction had been closed several years later. What happened there? Let's discuss. So picture this. We had a situation where we had a family that got to close on a piece of property that had been in the family for many years. They found a ready, willing, and able buyer. The buyer purchased the property after some time. Took a little bit longer than a normal transaction, but we got through it. Everything was good for the next 3 years. But we had to get back together for one reason and one reason only. There was a mistake made in the closing. When the survey was completed, which can happen, the surveyor copied information from an old piece of paper to the new piece of paper and didn't account for the change in property size. Picture this. At one point in time, this piece of property happened to be larger. A piece of it was cut off the pie and it was sold earlier. The surveyor had gone back and had taken that description from the larger piece of pie, copied and pasted it to the smaller piece of pie. Wasn't caught until recently. And because our laws are the way they are, as they should be, because this protects buyers and sellers, the new buyer could not proceed with what they wanted to do with that property until this was, of course, changed. Naturally, there was some hesitation from the original sellers because their question was, is this a scam? Because this is 2026, and that's the first thing that comes to people's mind. Is this some kind of scam? Are they trying to take something else from me? So we had to get through that concerns, and we had to do it very carefully and reasonably. For the buyer's perspective, they had already invested large sums of money getting this property ready, getting it just so they could use it for what they wanted to do. And failure to obtain the cooperation of the original sellers would mean they couldn't move forward. Or worse yet, we'd be in a situation where we have to get in a knockdown, drag out fight, and potential legal action could have been involved. But I reached out to these original sellers. I made sure I stayed in between because I didn't want to leave them to the devices of the new buyer. Not that I didn't feel that this buyer wouldn't treat them with dignity and respect, but for the simple fact that my concern was these original sellers, they knew me, they'd worked with me. And had I not been part of the transaction, it would have been much harder to justify reopening talks with the new buyer. So we got together. We had a meeting of the minds. We did a Zoom call. The new buyer at their location, the original seller with me. We went through a workable solution, moved forward, and we came up with something that everybody was happy with. The new buyer obtained the signatures that they needed. The seller had peace of mind that there was no funny business going on, and we were able to move forward with our lives. And that's so much of what we do, okay? So that story right there supports what we were discussing. We talked about all parties winning in a transaction, being treated with respect and fairness. We also talked about how, hey, sometimes when things you think are done are not done because of whatever reason, and we have to go back and figure things out. But at the end of the day, we came up with a way that everybody could win and be happy. And that's what's important. So as I leave you with something to go into the weekend, try to maybe come up with a solution when you're dealing with folks where everybody can feel win, like they won something, they got something out of it, versus browbeating somebody. That's your marching orders going into the weekend. So stay tuned. Be with us next Friday. We've got another great video coming your way about real estate in and around the Jacksonville, North Carolina area. I'm excited to share it with you. And I hope you enjoyed our first foray into a live format, Real Estate First Friday, which, as I said, this won't be an every week thing, but every once in a while we'll pull this out. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a great weekend. We'll see you next week right here at Living in and Around Jacksonville, North Carolina. So I encourage you to like and subscribe. Thanks so much. Bye now.